Hello everyone and welcome back to another Stormworks video. It's that time again for another Friday update here in Stormworks. Now this week the devs have gone and given us a whole bunch of new radar components here in Stormworks. Now these components have been added in of course for the major event, which is next week Tuesday, which is the weapons DLC release. These are specifically designed obviously to help us with the weapons DLC. So let's take a look at them. Now we've got 5 different ones. They've specifically been designed so that we can actually use them to detect objects or vehicles further than what we can see. The main issue that we had before is the radars worked, but they would only go and detect what has actually been loaded in. It wouldn't detect anything further. Even though it had, for example, 20-kilometer range, it would never detect that because the things that are outside of our view haven't actually simulated and loaded in. So that was an issue. So the devs have gone and fixed that apparently, so that's really good to hear. So now we could, for example, have a huge radar that could maybe go and scan up to the Arctic or wherever it needs to be, obviously within its own range. Now there's a couple different things that have changed on them, so let's go and have a look at them. Now you can find them in your workbench just like we always used to. You can simply find them by going into your inventory and typing in radar. Now you can see we've got all the new radar pieces over here. Now as I said, the first one that we have, which is the basic one, just replaces the old one. We also have the AWACS. We used to have one. It's a huge one. That's the one you would usually see on a plane. We also have the radar dish. We have the missile one, which is new. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And we also have the phalanx one. Now, each one of these have their own kind of like little settings to them. We'll go into the settings in a few seconds, but pretty much the range will differ between these. Okay, so for example, if you look at the basic radar, we have a maximum range of 6,000 meters, where for example, we'll go over to the dish, we have a 20,000 meter radius. Okay, so it all depends on which one you want for your own need. Now, the one that's made me very excited is the missile one. It is a really small and compact little radar, and this is something that we can add onto the front of our missiles to obviously direct it to its target. Now, the new settings with these radars, and you'll see this is a big change from what we had before, is that when you go into the logic part of it, now the logic is very, how should I say, condensed. Okay, so the only 2 things that you're going to be getting or sending to this radar is 1, if it's on, and 2 is rotation. Now before, with the old radars, we actually had to manually go and tell it what its rotation is. So you could obviously give it no rotation, which means it would just face forwards, or you could obviously go and make it rotate. For example, now these ones will do it by itself, and you can set the setting up inside of the radar simply by clicking on it. So you can come here and you can choose what type of mode it works. Is it in a static mode, meaning does it just face forwards? Does it go clockwise, anti-clockwise, or does it sweep? This is pretty cool because obviously this is stuff that we would have had to have done in Logic before or in Lua, but now we can obviously just click on it and set it. The one negative thing I find with this is that if you, for example, you have one radar on your plane and you want to go through different modes, you would specifically have to have 4 radars to go through 4 different modes. So that's the one negative thing. I would maybe like a setting in composite. We could just change that. But once again, you know what? It's okay for now. Along with that, if you do choose the sweep mode, you can choose the sweep speed, and you can also go and choose the sweep limit. Okay, so these are 2 more settings. You can also change the speed if you're in, for example, clockwise or anti-clockwise. You can actually choose the speed here. Now, another thing is you can change the horizontal and vertical field of view. Yes, that's correct. These radars will now go and detect both horizontally and vertically. This is something that we didn't have before with the regular radar. It would only go and detect horizontally, for example. So it's very cool to see that they've gone and added both modes into the radars all in one unit pretty much. Now you can change the field of view. Obviously being the lower means very narrow, so it'll only go and detect what it sees almost directly in front of it, or you can increase the field of view to detect more. But as you increase the field of view, you'll notice that the range goes down. Okay, so if you're looking for a very wide field of view here to try and capture as much as you can see here the range of this radar is only going to be 22 meters, which is nothing. Okay, obviously this is a very small radar, but you get the idea. If we were to maybe bump it up to the basic one and we were to go to full field of view on both, you will now see we've got a 66 meter range on this radar. Once again, not that much, but you should never really be looking at using a field of view of 90 on both of these. I would limit it down to maybe like 30 or something. Yes, there might be a couple of use case scenarios for it, but once again, it just depends on what you are doing. Now, you're probably thinking, well, Okay, NJ, we can tell it if it's on and we can see what rotation it's going on, but where does all the other data come from? Well, the rest of the data actually comes from composite, and I think this is a really cool idea. I love the idea of adding more things to composite. It makes logic runs much easier, I think. Now, how this works is this radar can detect up to 8 targets. This is also another cool feature which we didn't have before. So this can detect up to 8 targets. Now, what it does is it sends out its distance to a target. It sends, obviously, if it's found a target, it will find out its pitch angle, its pivot angle, or if you really want to get into details here, it's called azimuth angle and elevation angle. And it also finds out how long since it detected something. So for example, if you were going in, let's say 360 mode, you were in clockwise, it would tell you, hey, you know, I've detected that object, let's say 30 seconds ago or 60 seconds ago, or so on and so forth. So this is pretty cool and a new thing that we never had before. So you can maybe build this up into your logic, which I think is pretty cool. So those are the new features when it comes to the radar. Now, as I was saying, same settings on every single one of them. If we click on the radar dish, you'll notice once again, you can click on it and we get exactly the same settings on it. Okay, so they all work more or less the same. Now, what can you actually do with this? Well, there's quite a few things you can do. Now, of course, we can still go on the same old, you know, radar that we always used to have. I think the logic is a little more easier. I actually spent, I think about an hour this morning going and converting my old radar into the new one. And it's actually quite easy. I actually removed quite a bit of the math now, which is quite nice. So you can see here, we've just got a simple radar. It actually does turn now, which is something we didn't have before. They used to just be static and used to be like a mechanism inside it that turned. Now these actually turn. You can see them turning in front of you. Along with that, you can obviously see my radar is working. It's picking up some targets. I can increase the range here and go and find targets, and it should go and find that plane in a few seconds. There it is over there. Okay, so they work more or less the same if you want them to. However, because these can now detect up to 8 targets and it stores that data for you, you can actually come up with some really cool solutions. So I was just playing around with this morning and I was thinking, well, what if we were to try and get a heads-up display to go and, you know, find targets on our screen, like a targeting screen when you're flying along and it's like, oh, there's a target to your left, and it automatically found it for you. So I just play around with some logic and it's actually really simple. This is not meant to be a perfect working example. This is just could it work? And it can. It's just literally 2 nodes, composite from the radar into a lure block and then into my screen here. And it's just drawing a square at the target where it finds it. So there's a lot of possibilities that you can do with these radars. I like them. Obviously, there's some things that I think a lot of players won't like. For example, not being able to change the modes in-game, meaning that you have to take it back to the workbench to change the mode. And I think the other thing is maybe the range that you lose once you increase your field of view. I think a lot of players won't like that. But you know what, at the end of the day, there's a bunch of positives here, but there's also a few negatives. I like it. I think it's opening up a bunch more configuration that we can go and do in terms of building our systems. And obviously the major thing here that we all need to be very grateful for is that this radars can go and detect outside of our simulated area or outside of our area that we're in at the moment. So for example, if there was a ship in the far distance and we were using one of the big radar dishes that can go and, let's say, scan at 20 kilometers, then it would go and find that chip, which is, I think, a really cool feature. So guys, that's it for this little Friday update here. I think it's pretty cool. Of course, the major event that's going to be happening is next week, Tuesday, when we have the weapons DLC coming out. And definitely keep an eye out on the channel. As I promised, we will be doing a lot of videos on that. We'll be going through everything you need to know with the weapons DLC. We'll go over all the different weapons, the new game modes, we'll go over the new handheld stuff. We'll go into all details, so definitely keep an eye on the channel next week. There's going to be a lot of videos coming out as soon as the update gets released. And until then, if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next week, we will see you then.